The following program will make you want to grow things and experience new and wonderful dreams about your plants, garden, and garden design. Listener participation is always strongly advised. Good evening and welcome to Down the Garden Path with your hosts Joanne Shaw and Matthew Dressing, right here on Reality Radio 101. To get on board this evening, send us an email. Our email address is instudio101@gmail.com. And now, right to your hosts of Down the Garden Path, Joanne Shaw and Matthew Dressing.
Welcome, everyone, to Down the Garden Path, where we discuss down-to-earth tips and advice for your plants, gardens, and landscapes. As landscape designers and gardeners, we think it is important and possible to have great gardens that are low maintenance, and we want to help you make it happen. I'm Joanne Shaw, landscape designer and owner of Down to Earth Landscape Design. I have been designing beautiful gardens and landscapes for homeowners east of Toronto for over a decade. With me is my co-host Matthew Dressing. Welcome, Matthew.
Good evening, Joanne. Good evening, everybody. I'm Matthew Dressing, horticulturist and landscape designer and owner of Natural Affinity Garden Design. Natural Affinity is a landscape design and garden maintenance firm servicing Toronto and the Eastern GTA. Joanne and I enjoy hosting Down the Garden Path each week, bringing you interesting, relevant, and helpful topics to help you achieve a great garden. We learn right along with you from each other, from our research, and from the guests that join us here on the show. As always, we welcome your questions via social media, emails, or phone call.
That's right. And we want to thank you, as always, for joining us on this live version of Down the Garden Path, and let everybody know that are listening that you can also check out past shows. We record and then upload these recordings as a podcast. So you can search Down the Garden Path on your favorite podcast app, and you can find several years of great content. Right, Matt?
That's right.
That's right. And while you're there, please feel free to subscribe so that you'll be notified of new content. And as always, please, we'd love you to like, share, and maybe even leave us a comment.
Leave us more content. Yes.
That's right. Although it's very hard for those comments to get to us. So, there might be people who've left us comments and we haven't seen them.
Very true. Yes.
Yes.
So if you're one of those people, we apologize. We will find your comment and reply.
That's right. Welcome, everybody, to Down the Garden Path. And already July 13th.
July 13th. I can't believe it. I can't believe it. Hey, do you know what that means?
What does that mean?
That means it is less than a month until our shared birthday.
That's right. I knew you were going there. That's right. So anybody longtime listeners know that we discovered a few years ago that we actually share a birthday. Isn't that funny?
Wow. You know what? I don't remember that. You guys do?
You don't remember that? Yeah.
No.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, we do. We have the exact same birthday.
What's the birth date?
August 9th.
August 9th. For our listeners, remember that. Send gifts.
That's right. Send gifts. Yeah.
Tune in next year to August 9th. If the show actually falls on our birthday evening.
Oh, does it really?
It does.
Are we going to be there? Really? We're going to.
I think that we should have just this one big party show where we are hopefully at Gary's and we're eating cake and we're just taking listener questions.
I'm for that.
Okay. Are you for that? Okay.
Yes.
And we'll just say happy birthday and I'll bring you something and
wow. Okay.
Joanne's like, yeah, maybe not. Look at your face. Anyways,
Yes. Well,
yes, it's
welcome.
July
So
13th.
yeah. So fill us in. So
Ah,
July was last week. Our first episode in July was last week.
that's right. And we talked about this month on Down the Garden Path. This year we're doing every month is going to carry a new theme. And week we kicked off our new monthly theme of shrubs. So everything small and shrubby in your landscape, we're going to talk about it here on Down the Garden Path this month. And last week we had a whole topic about pruning all of your shrubs. So your evergreens, your deciduous shrubs, how to prune and take care of them. So that was some great content I think we had last week on the show. And then this week, we're going to continue that conversation. And I think we're going to talk all about focusing on evergreens,
Evergreen
uh,
shrubs specifically, right? Because I know
shrubs
there's a
specifically.
lot of evergreens in the landscape, and people have always got questions about things like cedars or pine trees, that type of thing. But
Yeah.
we're going to focus on landscape or evergreen shrubs, and I think they're really an important and often overlooked part of the garden.
I agree. And I
Yep.
think that a lot of them have a bad rep too.
Yes.
Um, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
The, everyone thinks they're just so big, or they instantly flash back to like 30 years ago when they were all those foundation plantings that
Mhm.
they just got so big and they were out of control and unmanageable. And you know what? They've come a long way from
Yeah.
that. And there's some great new cultivars and varieties out there that we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to take a look at some of our favorites.
That's right.
And
And I think people forget when they move into a 25-year-old home and there's this two huge massive junipers and they take those out to create a new garden and they don't want any more junipers, but they realize that it took 25 years for the juniper to get that big, right?
yes,
So that's
exactly.
first of all. And second of all, like you said, there's way more like back 25 years ago there was probably, two or three options as far as a low spreading evergreen. Now there's a lot more options and several dwarf varieties. I'm
Yes.
excited to talk about the dwarf ones because I think they've really come a long way. But there's pros and cons there too.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
by choosing a dwarf variety. So yeah, so I'm excited.
Yes.
So, well, we start off with let's talk about our segments. That's what it's called. I don't know.
Segments.
How are things
Yeah.
at the garden center?
The garden center is good. The garden center is good. Things are slowing down. We've got now, if you're unaware, we're here in the GTA of Ontario, Canada, and we now have our bylaw of masks are mandatory.
That's right.
So if you're in indoor space anywhere here in Southern Ontario GTA, we have to wear a mask. So most everyone, we always had a mask policy anyways,
Yeah,
and
and most people were doing it too, weren't they?
right, and we weren't the only ones doing it. A lot of
Yeah.
people were having the mask policy or asking, "Can you please wear a mask?" And so I'll sanitize. So we had them for $1 or $2 donation to a charity, and then you could buy face shields. So a lot of people are complying with that. Now that it's a bylaw, people aren't arguing. A lot of them were just like they
Yeah.
were just angry that they had to wear them. But yeah, so we're pretty good with them. The things are still going at the garden center. The shrubs, hydrangeas are coming into flower. Rosa Sharons are budding. So there's a lot of still things going on. Veggies and annuals have slowed. Traffic is slowed, but things are still active, and there's still lots going on and yet to be had out there in your garden center. So
Do you still have that inventory of like fruit trees and roses?
yeah, good question. Fruit trees were down to just plain apples. We're just
Okay.
straight apples. And roses, we've got there only one rose in stock right now.
Really?
Talking about shrubs, it's a shrub rose, and it's actually called the color cocktail. And so it's 3 feet by 3 feet, near thornless when she's young, and she comes up with yellows and whites and striped pinks and various different colors on her little 3 by 3. So she's pretty neat. She's a
But only
multitude of
one
colors.
variety? That's odd.
Yeah, you know what? Well, we usually have lots of roses going in through the summer, and we almost feel like to the point where we grow so many for us, and then the spring is really good, and then we try to bring them all in as we can to fit the space throughout our stores, and we feel that sometimes we get hung with them, that there's too many, that we've committed to. And this year they were gone before June. Like everything, even our supplier that you've gone through everything we've grown for you. There's nothing we could do. So people are out there, anything white, anything fragrant, and anything climbing this year right now are
Really?
huge. So and
Interesting.
yeah, so roses were low on. Color Cocktail also does have a nice fragrance too. If you were looking at that one,
Okay.
it almost looks like portulaca, I think. But anyways,
Oh,
yeah.
interesting.
So yeah, things are going good. Things are going good. Everything's safe, and everyone's still kind of social distancing, still bringing in pictures and trying to get too close. So we're still
Yeah.
backing up from people, but what do you do? Everyone's still being safe and
Yeah,
respectful.
everybody's still trying to figure it out, right?
Yeah,
Doing
yeah,
their
totally.
best. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's good.
So the garden center world is going well, but yeah,
Excellent.
don't be surprised if you find no veggies, no herbs, minimal
And no
annuals,
roses. I'm kind
tropicals,
of
no roses.
surprised. Yeah.
The other thing to note too with the garden centers is, um, and it may just be us or our area, but we're finding a lot of the chemical treatments, at least outside of the big box stores, are unavailable as well. So things like in here where we are, we have no Endol, no malathion. Some of the insecticidal soaps and fungicides are almost non-existent. And it's not that they're not being produced, but we're finding that the packaging companies, under the current circumstances, can't package and make enough of the stuff and get it all ready to go and ship out fast enough. So
Wow.
just because of that, yeah, the demand is slightly higher than the curve of supply. So
Huh.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
that's
So
interesting.
there's lots of different organic options and other chemical options. And if you're south of the border, our lovely neighbors to the south, you guys probably have way more options than
Yeah,
we
way more
do. So
options, unfortunately.
you're probably
Fortunately and
pretty far behind.
unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
for sure. That's funny you should say that because I went looking for some of my indoor plants in my office. Actually, started with some spider mites. Like my lovely orchid, my favorite plant in the whole world is my orchid, and I'm like noticing like all these little webs in my and I'm like, oh, and then I realized I have a bit of an infestation.
Oh,
So I took them outside and I went looking for my insecticidal, like my Endol insecticidal soap, and I had like 3 different containers of it. So actually, I'm well stocked because I have so much of it.
nice.
So
So
yeah.
if you're low, contact Joanne at the following number. One, no, no, I'm just kidding.
I know. So fingers crossed that I can save my orchid.
Yes. Yeah, you probably
Yeah.
can for sure.
Okay.
Um,
All right. Thanks for
yeah.
reassuring me. So yeah. So drought too. Like it must have been hard at the garden center. I know it's been hard in my yard, and like my garden's
Mm,
pretty tough, and I don't do a lot of babying of it. But I felt like a lot of stuff wasn't even blooming. Like my hydrangeas are really my quick fires, my bobo. Really, some of the other things were really behind, like just not doing anything,
yep.
and I think they just were needing some water. So we waited all weekend for the supposed storm to come, and I was out there with my sprinkler like on low and just kind of tucking it in amongst the shrubs, that type of thing to get everything a deep watering. So yeah, we didn't really get it.
No, we didn't, and we haven't. And the last few days have been great. I've loved that it's been cooler and a little rainier here in the GTA. And just
Yeah,
like you said, the drought has hit it. Yeah, the hydrangeas, they were budding, and then we got that crazy, crazy heat. My Bobo is doing the same thing. She's budded. She's just waiting though. So just a few
yeah,
of them again now that we're just catching up with the watering and had a few cool days. Things are definitely perking up, and the
yeah.
new growth is continuing to come out and look good. So
Good,
yeah,
good. Okay, yeah.
yeah. So, how about anything else going on in your garden? Or
No, I mean, I think the water definitely the weed. Although the weeds, nothing's stopping the weeds. So the weeds have kind of gotten a little bit out of control. More in my walkway, unfortunately, in the edge of walkway kind of thing. And I sent you, or I took pictures. I was just telling you offline. I'll send you a picture now. But I have 2 containers of dipladenia at my front door. And oddly, one of them is starting to die. Like I don't know what's going on. So yeah, I haven't had a chance to cut it back, but I got to get out there, I think, after this and cut it back. So yeah, so it's like 3 stems were in the pot, and 2 of the 3 stems have just died right back. So I've never seen anything quite like that. And I don't see any insects. I don't think I have overwatered or underwatered or anything. So yeah, so we'll see. But other than that, my garden, it's in a bit of a holding pattern. It's happier. My Japanese maple, my yellow one started to kind of get little crispy ends, and so I definitely ran a hose, give it a deep water. I think the biggest thing I know, I watch, like we talk about watering so much on the show, and I watch
Mm,
my neighbors, and they're quote unquote watering, and they're just moving the sprinkler so quickly or moving the hose wand. And I literally, like I said, I put the sprinkler on low so it's not really going shooting up high into the air, and then tuck it amongst the plants and just really give everything a really deep watering,
yeah,
you know.
and that's key. Yeah, just watering deeply and not letting that rain. I never trust the rain to water.
No, for sure,
So
for sure, for sure.
yeah.
So anyway,
Um,
so I know not everybody that is listening to us is in the GTA, so they might have rain or not rain, depending. I know all our Arizona and West Coast listeners are used to these kinds of conditions, right?
yes, yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah.
And
So
speaking of which, Walter here in the GTA has written in, hello, DTGP. Hoping you are staying healthy. Besides the obvious lake of water here in the GTA of Ontario, what can we do for our lawns and plants in this continued heat? I know water as much as possible, but are there any other things we should be doing to keeping our plants and our grass alive? Thank you for your advice, Walter.
mm,
And thank you for the question. Yeah, and Walter, you got it. Like just like Joanne was saying, how to water, watering deeply, watering regularly. You know, water it nice and deeply, leave it for a bit, come back and water it again. Build up some of the water that's bonding to other water in the soil. As far as your lawn goes, making sure that you're cutting it high. Here in the GTA, we have cool season grasses that we're growing. They like that cooler season, keeping the grass cool. And the same thing with our plants, protecting them with mulch. If you've got some really windy spaces, cutting the wind, maybe it's, planting a windbreak or doing something like that. But wind is just as drying and desiccating, not that we like
yeah.
too much. But yeah, so and then just protecting our plants that way too.
Yeah, and I think some of our containers maybe that we planted for full sun, but then with this wave so brutal that maybe if you can move your container into more part sun locations just
Yes.
temporarily, helps them not dry out as quickly, and also kind of gives them a bit of a breather.
Yes, exactly. And I'm very blessed that way. My balcony gets some good sun, but by like 2 in the afternoon, it's around the building and it cools everything off. So I get that. I got to water, definitely. It's drying out, but it gets some afternoon relief. So that's a great tip too. Yeah,
Excellent, excellent.
repositioning your
Yeah,
containers.
your plants. How is your garlic doing?
It is great. You know what? I decided to leave the flowers on. I'm gonna let them open and see the bulbils and just see how big they actually get,
Okay.
um, and see what happens there. And plant some because I hope planted a whole bunch and a whole bunch didn't come. So I'm gonna the four hardiest ones that lived. I'm gonna see if I can replicate them and
Oh,
use those
cool.
genetics for next
Excellent.
year's crop.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Excellent.
yeah,
Excellent. So, well, I'm really excited to talk about evergreens. I think they are something that people overlook. They feel like the garden's all about flowers when they're doing a garden, right? And shrubs and perennials and annuals and things. But I think, especially here in Ontario or anywhere where there's winter much of the year, I think that is really the key to a seasonal garden is having some structure and some evergreen presence. Because that gets you 4 seasons of interest. Don't you agree?
I agree. And when I think of the like four seasons of interest, number four for me is definitely like the evergreens are a huge one. And then
Hmm.
you've got your dried flowers and other colored branches and things. But when
Yeah.
it sticks out into my mind, it's evergreens for sure. The
Hmm.
blues, the reds, the greens that all come together in the landscape for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Excellent. So in our notes, I know is you say evergreens versus conifers.
Yeah, yeah. It was a rush to quickly put something together. I was working on the wrong show notes for
That's
tonight.
okay.
But yeah, so I quickly wrote evergreens versus conifers. So evergreens and conifers, um, the evergreens are evergreen, and so are conifers. But the difference is that conifers will have large cones, and they can be like your spruces and your pines and things like that. And your evergreens, like your junipers, might have small juniper berries. They produce a cone-like yellow flower in the spring when it's time, but then they fill themselves with other little berries. So conifers are just referring to evergreen plants that bear cones. Yeah,
Okay.
I thought
Okay.
that was just
Yeah,
popped
because
in my.
people, but I think people do. Some people refer to them as evergreens, and other people refer to them as conifers. So
Yes,
I think, or even in written, like saying, I think people when they're reading it, just to make sure them that they understand. So would you agree that most of the conifers are like the larger?
yeah, they tend to be the bigger. There's always the odd exception,
Yes,
exception,
exception.
obviously. But yeah, your bigger pines, your bigger spruces,
Yeah.
some bigger hemlocks, things like that, for
Okay.
sure,
Cool.
for sure.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah.
So yeah. So where do we want to start?
You know what? Why don't we start? I've got actually three other questions that
Woohoo!
have rolled in. Yes. Um, so Scott writes in, "Hello, Joanne and Matthew. Happy in advance birthday to the both of you. Thank you very much, Scott. What is the fastest evergreen to grow? Just curious.
Ooh.
Oh yeah, and I like vanilla cake. Oh, we'll save you a piece.
Nope, it's all about the chocolate.
Is
Sorry.
there?
No.
My favorite's the double layer of cookie crumble and the Dairy Queen cake.
Oh, okay. Is
Nice
that your
cake.
favorite? Okay, I'll keep that in mind.
um, yeah, so some fast growing evergreens. Um, there's a number of cedars, sorry. So Thuya plicata, Thuya occidentalis, they can be fairly quick growing when once they're established. There's some things like Taylor junipers if you're looking for something that's very tall and narrow as well. A number of the hollies. There's some hybrids of the hollies
Really?
that can be fairly quick growing
Okay.
as well. Something like Nell R. Stevens, for example, more on the broadleaf evergreen
Yeah.
side of things.
I think of the spruces, like I think of like the Colorado or the
Mhm,
Norway spruces, right? Those are definitely larger trees, like larger evergreens.
right. Yeah. And then there's some other things like the leyland cypresses that are also fairly quickly, that
Mm.
can be quick growing as well.
Yeah.
Um, and I was just looking back, where did I have the email? Because I wasn't sure. No, you didn't say where you were from Scott. So maybe that answers your question. And just again, not quite sure where you were from. So hopefully that helps you there
Yeah.
for sure.
All right.
Another question comes in from Sherry. Sherry writes, "Hello, folks. Matt, you mentioned that you have some apple trees left at your store. If I planted one this summer, how soon before I see apples? Do I need to plant two apple trees for pollination? Thank you for the information, Sherry." Yeah, Sherry, good question. Yes. So the apple trees that we have left at our store, they're usually about 3 to 5 years old, depending on the supplier that we get. Most of them will flower and begin to fruit at about the 3 to 4 year old range. So there are times, Sherry, where we will have fruit in the yard at the garden center. We'll have some fruit that we can pick or that we can see. They're not going to bear fruit that young right away, like very quite full. Like you're not going to have harvests and mass amounts of apples to be giving away, but you will start to get some apples fairly young, and then as they reach their 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, they'll definitely have a lot more fruit to bear for you. If you did, yeah. So if you planted one this summer, you should see some for next year for sure. But again, not tons.
What
Uh,
about the pollination? Are the ones self-pollinating?
yeah, you got it. So there are some self-pollinating ones out there, Sherry, for sure. Delicious apples are, I believe Granny Smith is, but there's a debate about that. Um, but there are some multiple and ones as well. So yes, you do need two apple trees to generally pollinate. Even the self-pollinating ones, they will self-pollinate and give you some fruit, but they will always produce and bear better when they have the cross-pollination of somebody else. So, for example, the Red Delicious would self-pollinate, but if you had something from a Granny Smith or another compatible apple, she'll fruit out a little bit better.
So the trick there is that you need to buy yourself a fruit tree, and they're actually fairly inexpensive,
Yeah.
and your neighbor a fruit tree, right? So then
Yes,
there you go.
exactly.
So that's the thing, because you don't have, most yards don't have room for 2 apple trees,
Right.
right?
And then that's where the multiple in ones come in. So you can get one tree with 4 grafted varieties on it, and then all 4 varieties will self pollinate each other. And then you've got a dwarf or semi dwarf tree as well.
Okay,
That's another way to go.
perfect. But none of those are available right now.
Yeah, no, good. Yes, thank you. Yeah, Sherry, right now the multiple in ones are usually first thing at the end of April, beginning of May, and then they're gone. People like you, they're thinking ahead, they get really excited, and they're after one pretty quickly.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Excellent.
Greg has written in. Greg says, "Hello, plant people. Hi. Is it a good time to plant a red maple tree? I have 2 available to me for free, but not sure if I should wait until the fall to plant. Thank you for your advice. Oh, P.S. If so, any tips to plant successfully? Thank you." Summer is a weird time to plant, and as I was writing this, Greg, Joanne's head was bouncing back and forth, and they're kind of agreeing with me, like yes and no. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong. um, but yeah, yes and no. Yes, in the way that we're going to be home and you're going to be able to take care of it given this year. No, in the way that we are a vacationing people and we like to, lazy days of summer kind of thing, and we like to go away for the summer. And then our plants get left behind. They don't get water. They don't get the attention they need to under the summer stresses. So yes, Greg, if you are home and you can take care of it and you can keep it watered and you don't really need to feed it too much, just again add some compost, give it some light nutrients. We don't want to encourage too much growth we need it to harden off. You can plant it now. I also like to plant it where you dig the hole first and leave it for a day, overnight, leave it overnight open, and then plant it in the morning. And just let some of the heat get out of the hole because the summer ground is warm, right? And it's usually warmer, especially if you're just cutting open the lawn or bare soil. The heat will absorb into that if it's not protected or naturally just a semi-shaded or a cool spot. So I like to leave the hole open if I can. Could be some safety issues there as well. Disclaimer: let the soil cool off, get exposed, and then plant it first thing in the morning when it's still cool, and then just kind of keep an eye on it. In the fall, definitely is a good time to plant. They say fall is the time to plant because the sun is retreating to the south, the water table's naturally up, the heat is down, and the plants are just a lot less stressed. And if you can plant it on a cool, cloudy day like today here in the GTA, not sure again where you are, Greg, that will also reduce the stress and help you get it in there successfully. But as early as you can get it, for sure. And if they're free, the red maples are, I would for sure. I'd go after them.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say that my biggest tip is to make it easier watering is then I would say the tree bags.
Yeah.
Right. To I think really helps get, twice a week, you fill the bags, slow, deep watering. So yeah, I mean, as much as, the fall is a good time, I just think, the time that you're home and around and able to do it is the best time. Right. So yeah.
For sure. And that's what another thing is, with the fall, right? We're all back to school and we're all back to work and we all have our back to our routine, whereas summer it's very broken.
And also there's no guarantees. Like we've had some really hot falls. We've had some really cold, like last year, it was freezing mid-October after Thanksgiving. So it's so tricky. So I think as long as you're around to look after it, that's the biggest key, regardless of when you're going to plant it.
Yeah. Exactly. We've
All
got questions pouring in.
Oh my goodness. Are any about evergreens? I feel bad. We're not going to talk about evergreen shrubs.
Everyone's at home like, hurry up. What's that one Joanne was talking about? Alexis quickly writes in. I don't know how quickly she was, but hi, I know this might be a generic gardening question, but can you please review what the numbers on fertilizer bags mean? I'm not sure what they mean exactly.
Ooh,
so Alexis, sorry, go ahead. Go for it.
Good question. Yeah.
So Alexis, quickly, there's like a little rhyme. And for the first 3 numbers, if you're reading left to right, it goes up, down, and all around. So the first one is
Really?
nitrogen, and
Okay.
it's going to grow everything above the ground. It's greening, new growth, just growth basically. It's the first major nutrient. Down, the phosphorus is the second number, and it has a major role in developing and fattening up roots. It also plays a big part in, pardon me, building the ovary in flowers. So that's why you'll see things like Miracle-Gro or Ultra Bloom or your other local house brand, where the flowering fertilizer will have a high middle number, as well as starting with cuttings and things. And that's going to develop your roots as well as your flowers. And then lastly is the potassium, the all around. And it plays a big part in, basically, I like to think of it as almost like our vitamins. It's basically like immune system. So it's like the resistances and stresses and the plant's ability to do that. But it also plays a big role in overall cellular structure and operation, as well as the efficiency of the roots to draw up and utilize nutrients. So up, down, all around, growth, roots, and
So
immune system.
nitrogen, phosphorus, and
Right.
potassium, right?
Right.
NPK is often
NPK.
some because the sign for potassium is K. So NPK, you'll see that referred to that, or nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. So that you'll see like the 20-20-20 or the yeah.
Yeah, 15, 30, 15, 10,
Yeah.
50 to 10.
Perfect. Great question.
Yeah. Oops, there we go. Another question writes in, and let's see if I can bring up. Here we go. James is written in. Question for you: any natural ways for pest control? Pick your pest, as I have most. That's a very, very broad question, James.
Yeah, I know what kind of pests. We need some more info, I think, on that one.
Yeah.
Right? Is it insect? Is it animal? Is it yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Just very quickly, I guess, James, if you want to clarify that one, uh, look for attracting beneficial insects or releasing beneficials, predatory mites, aphids, or some aphids. They're not a beneficial
Ladybugs.
insect. Ladybugs, thank you, because they eat
Yeah.
aphids, praying mantises, and just know what insect you have, and then apply the proper natural control at the right time, because everything has a life cycle, and it's taking advantage of that life cycle. And I always draw it to the human comparison. We're weakest when we're asleep. So our daily cycle, that's when we're usually the most vulnerable. So just kind of knowing that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next question.
Paul writes in, and another one pops in. Paul, my soil's pretty much clay here in Yonkers, North NYC, New York City. Very hard to grow or irrigate anything. Any ideas as to what I might add to the soil to have better results? Bags of soil on the top of clay, question mark. Dig out the clay and replace it with soil or sand. Thank you for your insight. Yeah, the Great Lake area and a bunch of the surrounding areas, we do have naturally like a clay loam. But the natural enemy of the clays and the sands that are bending the soil, Paul, is going to be organic matter. So just keeping that soil alive with microorganisms and rich with organic matter. And the organic matter and the life in the soil is going to help rebuild and restructure that clay. I wouldn't go digging out and excavating too much, especially when you're planting newer shrubs and evergreens. What happens is you dig a clay bowl and the clay holds water. It doesn't let it kind of escape quick enough. So what can happen is you basically just create a bowl and your plants get overwatered. So yeah, slowly add new compost every spring or every fall. Excavate your soil. So when you plant an evergreen or another shrub, dig it just as deep as the soil is in the pot, a little bit wider, 6 to 8 inches wider. If you hit clay, you can plant up to 3 inches above the grade, but plant as close to the grade as possible. And then mix some compost in with that clay. So you'll get a little bit of compost, which will encourage the roots to come out. Some new air and water will come out and encourage those roots to expand. But then that clay and those microorganisms will help feed the plant and change the immediate soil. But it is a long process, Paul.
Yeah.
It's not going to be an overnight thing by any means.
But things like saving your leaves, right? Yeah. So if you've got a lot of trees, or neighbors' trees, some people take the bags, saving your leaves and crushing them and mixing, like laying them down on the gardens, even the lawns, if you can mow over them and let them kind of decompose, that's going to help improve. So I think really looking for like you said, natural organic matter, like leaves, manures, compost, different compost, mushroom compost, that type of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So hopefully that answers your question, Paul. And lastly, Bob has written in, and very related to last week, Bob writes in, "Hi, does someone really have to prune shrubs? A friend of mine told me that it was not necessarily necessary, that it was only for aesthetics. Is that true? I am specifically talking about hibiscus. Thank you." In general, Bob, definitely check out last week's show because we kind of talk about everything for pruning, but it does come down to a few things. Aesthetics, one of them, for sure. Do you like the look? Do you like the shape of your shrub? Do you have to prune it? No, everything comes with a natural beauty. Picking the right plant and the right size of the right garden. We always talk about it's Joanne's thing, right? Making the garden big enough to take the plants that you want really lowers your maintenance. That's a huge key. So, as far as hibiscus, is it perennial? Is it like the Rose of Sharon? Is it the tropical one? Or are you in Florida kind of deal? But yeah, really, outside of aesthetics, just do you have any dead branches? Remove all of that. Take out any diseased or damaged limbs that might cause other issues. And always take out anything crossing and that's rubbing against each other. Imagine just rubbing your wrist, uh, just back and forth. Your skin gets chafed and irritated. Same thing with the bark. You cut into those layers, and that can attract other insects and diseases and let pathogens attack. So, yeah, no, I mean, talking about evergreens tonight, one of my favorite things about evergreens are the globe cedars. And I know it's cedars.
Really?
I
Yes.
love a beautiful, something like Danica, right? Danica or someone, Danica is probably my favorite globe. It's just a nice 2x2. It's a rounded globe cedar. And when it's just left and to do its own thing, I love the globe cedars because they make this perfect ball, Bob. And you don't need to prune it when you give it the time and you don't shear it and you don't shape it and just let it get to its max. Again, pick the right size for your garden. I love how neat and dense the globe cedars are going. And I had someone down the street, and they have beautiful. I think they were little giant. They were like 3x3, 4x4. They were perfect spheres. And then they hired a new landscape company, and they came and they hacked them in half because they felt that they needed to be trimmed, and they just went downhill. It was just
Yeah.
they're dead now. They removed them last year.
Yeah.
It just yeah. So no, not necessarily. I mean, everything
Yeah.
has its own shape. So
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So that's interesting that that's your favorite.
well, one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just so beautiful. That's just so neat how it can make such a dense,
Hmm.
nice little globe. And a lot of people feel they have to prune them.
Yeah. Well, even
So
things like boxwoods, I think people often, when I put them in gardens, people are like, well, what do I need to do? Like, do I need to keep it
yeah,
trimmed, or it's high maintenance because you have to trim it all the time? And it's like, it's really not. Like, it has its natural shape. And as long as you let it go with its natural shape
mm-hmm.
and keep an eye, then it doesn't require a ton of shaping and pruning.
Right. That's
Yeah.
right.
And I think something too that you often see is that the with evergreens in gardens is that people feel like it has to be a shape. So they
Yes.
have to make them into round balls, or they have to, you come across those gardens where everything's a ball or everything's a square.
Yes.
But if you look in nature, that's not the case, right? So I think,
No.
letting the shrub, if you planted the right plant in the right spot, then letting it have its natural shape, reading the tags. There's lots of, I'm excited to talk about some of my favorite dwarf varieties that, that are slower growing and are going to be a little smaller. Like I think of, because everybody thinks of like Mugo pine. Oh my gosh, that gets big and sprawly and those big candles, and it gets really, but there is a dwarf variety of Mugo pine. Now, mind you, it's tiny. So it's tiny and it's going to be a while before it really makes its place in the garden. So you really have to balance that. If
Yeah.
you have a really small yard, then I think it's a really good impact. Or you can plant three of them because it's going to be, eventually it'll make a statement, right?
Right.
So yeah, but I think even a new a mugo pine looked after properly will take a long time before it really quote unquote takes over the garden.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And there's, Bob, another reason to be pruning, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
for sure. And we talked about that last week about how to take the candles off and things like that. So
Yeah.
it's not, and again, it's not something you're doing every weekend. It's
No.
it's like once a year, once every other year. Just to kind of control the growth. But I think they offer such a neat shape and neat character, add some character to the garden that often I know I have one picture in my portfolio where I show people, and it's like a green it's a yew hedge, or it's just a big green yew, and then there's lots of lovely flowers. There's a fence, a yew, and flowers in front of the yew. And I try to explain to people, I'm like, those flowers are beautiful and they would look beautiful in front of that fence, but look how much better they look in front of the evergreen.
Mm.
And I think that's what you need to remember is that there's the brick wall, like the things can get lost in your brick wall or lost in the fence, or lost amongst each other. Like having evergreens in the mix between perennials and between shrubs just offers that contrast. And I think you do notice the flowers a little bit more. Gives your eyes some place to rest. So I really think that there are a lot of great evergreen options. Do we want to do like a quick list?
I was gonna say, why don't you jump into some of those options or some of those your favorite ones for that?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, obviously, I mean, we talk about them a lot. I feel like, and they're more common. Things like the boxwood and yews.
Mm.
There's three different stages of kinds of yews that I think people don't realize. That dense yews are lower and shorter and wider, so they're good for a low hedge.
Hmm.
Hills yews get a little bit taller than dense yews, but also get wider, where Hicks yews are more columnar and they're taller and narrower.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like a quick overview. We could probably do a whole show on yews, but
Good.
that's yews and yews.
Yeah.
um, junipers have their place. They're not my favorite. I find them very prickly. So whether you're looking for like upright junipers or spreading junipers, but there's some really nice ones that stay really compact and add like a really nice texture to the garden. I think of the blue star, the low
Mm.
carpet blue rug carpet junipers. Some of the blue ones especially are very drought tolerant and salt tolerant. So
Yes.
anybody out there with gardens close to the sidewalk, close to the driveway, for in my case close to the curb, that things keep dying because of the snow and the salt, then those are great options. They're nice low spreaders, and there's just something about that blue needles that they don't absorb the salt, so they are really good options. Some of the like Andorra juniper, you probably know a couple others. There's some junipers that actually change color, that are kind of green in the hot season, and then as the temperatures cool down, they kind of get a bit of burgundy to them, right?
Yeah.
So that can be a nice thing to look for.
Mm. And any of them with, if you look at the Latin name as well as like the common name, the horizontalis group. So if you look, for example, one of my favorites is lime glow. So it's a lime glow juniper. But if you look at the Latin name, it's Juniperus horizontalis. The horizontalis take on a lot of purples and burgundy colors for the
Ah,
winter. So they're a great group. Lime glow, I love it. It's like 2 to 3 feet tall, 3 to 4 feet wide. It's that chartreuse yellow, the young foliage in the growing season, and then it really goes to like shades of like a red, copper, bronze in the winter. And it's really weird because some people think it's dead, but it's actually just it's changed its color. So
oh,
they're
that's
great as a
interesting.
small ground cover accent, but you get that different color in the winter as well. So
So how tall does it get?
yeah, she only gets like 2 to 3 feet tall. So
Oh, okay, so still, yeah, it's not so bad.
no, so
Hmm.
like three. I think three is her biggest. So yeah, she's a moderate shrub. I wouldn't say she's too dwarf.
Yeah,
More like mounding vase shape.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, it
for
was just
sure.
again that interest in that color.
Yeah, and my favorite yellow, because another thing is evergreens aren't just green. So I
Aren't
think that's a
green.
nice feature is that there's some that have a yellow and that go to a burgundy in the fall. I love and I put it in almost every garden. You have your favorites,
Yep.
but it's a gold false cypress, threadleaf cypress. So the needles are very thready. It's not as prickly. That's my thing about junipers. As much as I like their look in a certain way in certain ones, but they're very prickly. So if you do have to, garden around them and stuff, I find I do break out in a bit of a rash. But the
Yes.
threadleaf cypresses are also very salt tolerant. I've got a one beautiful one beside my driveway, tons of salt and not tons of salt, but salt and snow and ice get plowed onto it every winter and it's fine. So I definitely love them. I love that it's yellow, although I'm not a yellow flower person, so it's kind of funny that I love yellow foliage, but I'm not a yellow flower fan. So I love the pop of yellow. I love it married with like a burgundy Japanese maple or burgundy shrubs like rose barberry.
Yeah.
Those driveway gardens that are like hot and dry, and you need something there that you don't really need to babysit at all, and you can't go wrong with like a burgundy barberry and a threadleaf cypress.
No.
There you've got burgundy and yellow, and and it's just going to look after itself. Something you taught me was a couple of years ago. You caught me on to something called fire chief cedars. Is that what they're called?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm loving them because I have a lot of yews at my property, a lot of the dense hills and Hicks yews, and I wanted something a little bit different for my front garden, and Matt had recommended that. And they're round, they're kind of very boxwood like. They're not a typical cedars, but they're very soft. Like the needles are very different, and mine don't get a ton of sun, so they're not as yellow. They've kind of gone a bit of a bluish tone, which I don't mind. But I know I've seen them in the sun with getting much more sun, and they do kind of have that yellow to them.
Yeah. Yeah. The younger growth gets that kind of like chartreusey green
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
mhm.
So you can look for those. And yeah, they're like 2 years old now and they're still like 2 feet by 2 feet. Like they really haven't grown. So not everything, I mean, will get big. And I think people have to understand that you shouldn't be pruning it into a square to control its growth, but just plan for it.
Yes.
Plan for, and the dwarf varieties, you might have to put two or three in because and then they will eventually grow into one and look like, I think of the mugo pines. They're really tiny, like really like these little tight balls, and
Yeah.
then so if you plant three of them, then they will eventually kind of meld together and be a nice specimen in the garden. um, and I think of things like the birds. People often don't think of that birds want to hide, they want the shade of evergreens, they want to hide from predators in the evergreens, and not just big spruce trees, because not all of us have a yard where you can fit a big evergreen, right?
That's
And not
right.
everybody wants a cedar hedge or something like that. So having these, if you're into the birds and into feeding birds in your garden, it's not just about the flowers and the echinacea and things like that for the birds to eat. They do need some evergreens, some shade, some hiding places, some resting spots. Yeah, so there's my spiel. I don't know. I think I missed some too. I can't believe how fast the show's gone, and I think we're getting a lot more questions because
I was gonna
I
say,
can
can you
see
see the
your
face
face.
I'm making at you?
Yes, yes. I guess we should. I guess we'll have to remember that our mid-July show, and I think we did one last year where our mid-July show was all just garden questions. So
Yes.
I guess we need one of those.
It's time.
It's time.
I mean, yeah, you got it.
How'd I do? Okay.
You did well. You did well. Yeah, for sure. I can't even, I guess the only thing I can think of would be, um, just one of my favorite too is like the evergreen. There's some broadleaf evergreens for shade, um,
Right.
as well. Like don't forget your euonymuses and there's some hollies and hemlocks and things like that. But I think you got it. I think you hit it.
Okay. Yeah, that is something for people to know that if they do have shade, you can have evergreens too.
Yeah.
And yews are very good for that. And good, I think the good thing too is evergreens tend to be pretty tough. I think cedar is
Mm,
probably the wimpiest of all of them, needing a little bit more water. But they don't like yews. Don't they often come in those big buckets of clay, right?
yeah.
They definitely are tough plants. So people who are afraid of gardening and new to gardening, that having those be kind of a structure in your garden can really help. And I know I always tell my clients, my garden, most of my garden, not all of it, but there's a good sections of it, especially when I first moved in, are all hedged by low dense yews. And I tell people, like, one, you can't see my weeds because they're all behind the yew, they're behind the hedge. And two, in the winter, like all season long, my garden is framed.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's more of a plug for hedges versus just evergreens, but that's something to think about. If you're not sure how to use them or why to use them, there you go.
Very good.
Yeah, yeah.
Do we
So,
want to hit a few
um,
questions and
yeah,
then
sure. Let's hit some questions. I know we're
ooh,
running out of time.
that's it? And if we think of something evergreen, we'll throw her in
That's
there.
right. Yeah, thank you for everybody for the questions. It's awesome.
We love your questions. We love hearing from you guys and answering your questions. John writes in, hello everyone. I just wanted to say that I'm enjoying your radio program tonight from Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. I listen to
Excellent.
you each week when I can, and thanks for the advice. Much appreciated to me, John.
Oh,
So
thanks, John.
thanks, John.
Excellent.
We're glad that you're enjoying it. And we hope everyone is. Mike has written in, and I think it's a different Mike than from before. Or maybe I'm just remembering when your question came in, Mike. Hello, Joanne and Matt. Help, I have some black leaves on my magnolia trees. Do you know what that could possibly be? Also, the leaves are attracting wasps. Any idea?
Mm.
Thank you. And yes, Mike, my guess, and I would say 99% sure you have magnolia scale. And if you look up into your tree, you'll see some bumps. Tis the season on the branches and even the trunk. And what they're doing, they're little vampires, are sap sucking. Their sap is pouring out of their mouth because they can't eat it fast enough. And they're pooping out the rest of the sap that they enjoy. And basically, what it is the sooty mold is taking advantage of the sap covered leaves. And then the wasps and other insects, the wasps are beneficial. Remember, they're going to hunt other insects. They might be having some scale and investigating others in your garden, but they're going to take advantage of, again, that high sugar sap and poop that the insects are giving you out. So take
Now,
a
is that
close
going to
look.
kill? Is it going to kill the magnolia?
Well, repeat it. If you don't get on top of it a few years, what it'll do is it'll weaken the tree, and then one winter or really crazy hot summer day, depending on where you are, Mike, she'll give it up.
Okay. So what
And
does
the
Mike
tree will
do?
go. So yeah, take a look. Make sure that it is scale. You'll see they're kind of like fuzzy white, and then the half of their body is brown. But usually like a dormant oil spray. And again, depending on where you are, you might have another spray available to you in the States if that's where you are, Mike, that you could spray or inject into the tree to poison them and remove them. But there is a summer application of here in Canada, dormant oil that you can do when it's 27 degrees or less. It'll smother the scales. You might have to do it 2 or 3 times, and it'll remove them. And the magnolia is definitely savable. So don't run out and cut it out.
Yeah, good, good. All right.
That would be my best guess. Charlie's written in. Hi, Joanne and Matthew. Always love your radio show. Thank you. And I have a question for you tonight. Do I need to put holes in the bottom of my pots? Someone told me that it was good for drainage, and someone else told me that it was not necessary. I worry about the rotting of the roots of my plants. Is that true? Thanks. Oh, what were you?
No, I'm good.
Okay. You're good. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's one of those debatable things, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It really comes down, Charlie, to your control of the watering. What plant you have, what pot, how big is it? When in doubt, put the holes in because the earth drains, right? If you pour water onto the ground, it drains away.
Yeah.
It might have some clay in there, but it's still going to take some time. It's going to drain away. So ultimately, plants have adapted that the water will move through their root zone. They'll take advantage and they'll go. When you don't have holes in it, you do run the risk of rotting it because the water will sit there. It'll fill the soil. It'll push the air out of the soil, and the roots exchange oxygen like we breathe. So you'll basically suffocate the roots. Especially then that's where it plays into the type of plant that you have. If it's a peace lily and it's in full sun and you have no holes in your water, you're perfectly fine. Spathophyllums, they won't care. If it's more in the full shade, she might get a little issuey with you. Or if it's a succulent and you've got water in there and you're not letting it dry out to the bottom of that pot,
Yeah.
right? So
So it
use a
depends.
moisture meter or a spoon or something wooden
Yeah.
to check that water. But
Yeah. And saucers, I think if you're going to have a
yeah,
hole, then I think have a saucer, because then, because sometimes I think people are like, well, it's draining and I'm watering it, and but I think if that it's not still not happy, but I think if there's a saucer, then it's drained, and then what Mike was talking about, how then it just can soak up that excess water. Because sometimes the water, especially when they're dry, when it's really dry, the water goes through so quickly, that the plant didn't even really absorb anything. So I think that's the benefit. So I've
yeah,
done both. I have both in my garden right now. We've got a variety of vegetables and fruit and flowering things, some in holes, some without holes. So yeah, it's a bit of trial and error.
yes,
Yeah.
totally. Your watering technique, your plants. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, hopefully that definitely will help you, Charlie.
Yeah.
Karen has written in, hi, after this drought here we've had here in southern Ontario, I'm contemplating getting an in-ground sprinkler system.
Mm.
I know that you both designed such landscape innovations. Could you possibly recommend a good in-ground sprinkler company? Thank you.
Excellent. Well, you can probably, I think it was last year.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, what was our guest's name?
Aquaman.
No, that I know, but the,
Oh,
the
oh,
person who
that's
wrote
it.
in.
Yes, I'm totally for blanking on his name.
No. It was Aquaman, but who's the person who just asked the question?
Oh, Karen.
Karen.
Sorry.
Okay, sorry, Karen. So we Aquaman irrigation. Daniel was on
Thank
the
you.
show last year, and you can definitely reach out to him. Please tell him we sent you. I hear great things about him. I haven't used him directly yet, but definitely he's well known in the GTA. And yeah, I mean there is something to be said for needing an irrigation system,
Yes,
and
definitely.
just how the control you can have. And some people will say they're not, they're excessive, or you're wasting water, and they're not environmentally friendly, when I think it's actually the exact opposite. You can control when you water, how long you water, where you water. And I think, compared to me forgetting about my hose and watering the street, yeah. So please, Aquaman, he says he wished he uh trademarked the name, but Aquaman irrigation.
I thought I was trying to remember Daniel's name, and I
Yes,
didn't
I know.
realize
I'm
you
like,
wanted Karen.
I gotta pay attention when you say who asked the question, because I like to refer it, but answer them. So
Yeah.
I apologize.
Well, Eric,
Eric.
I think is going to be our last question of the day. As it's three
Okay.
minutes to 8. Hello. Is it a good idea to water my vegetable plants during the day now when the sun and heat are very hot? Can I water those plants at night when it is a bit cooler, although still very warm? I'm talking peppers, tomatoes, and zucchini. Thank you. I would say yes, but Eric, watch where you're watering is the key. Don't water the leaves. If they're under drought stress and they've dried out during the day and you want to get them some water, like Joanna was saying to Charlie about water just pouring through the soil, if it's dry, water it once, only at the base of the plant. So know where your peppers and your tomatoes are going to be easy, but your zucchini, find where you put it in the ground and water there.
Hmm.
Never water the leaves. You're going to get issues. You're going to get heat stress. You're going to do more damage and bother the plants.
Sometimes
Um,
I know I did in my son's garden. He likes to water it with the wand, but yesterday I took off the wand and just had the bare empty hose,
yeah,
and I had it on low, and I just kind of moved it slowly as I was puttering around in the backyard, and like had the base of the zucchini plant and the base of the onions and the base of the cucumber plant,
got it.
that type of thing. So yeah, I mean ideally morning is always going to be best, but not
Yep,
everybody's up early to do that.
right.
Eric. So yeah, so just keeping it, knowing that you're watering the soil, and you don't need to water the leaves, and you don't need to water the stems or the vegetables and fruit, right? You're just
Yes.
watering the soil.
When it rains, Eric, you don't really get quench your thirst on your skin, right? You
Right.
still drink that water. So same
Yeah.
with your plants.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So what a great show. Oh my gosh, people have lots of questions. So we will definitely remember that. I'm going to put on our Instagram and some social media. I'll tweet out our last year's question and answer, because I'm sure there's lots of questions people still have. So I
That's
will
right.
please, or if you're on our podcast app, you can search for that July garden questions and answers. And so thank you everybody for listening. I think we got a little bit of information in there about our topic of
I
evergreen.
think.
If you have more questions, you can reach out to us here at instudio101@gmail.com. Right? Gary will forward that to us and we'll answer you offline. If you want to reach out to us directly, so me, I am at, you can find me on my website, I'm Joanne at downtoearth.ca is my email, or my website is downtoearth.ca, number 2, so down number 2 earth.ca. And
right.
Matt?
You can find me at naturalaffinitydesigns.ca with my email, matthew@naturalaffinitydesigns.ca, and my social media links there. Don't forget to check out past podcast episodes with lots of other information. You can also chat to us on Facebook at Down the Garden Path Podcast, as well as at Down the Garden Path Podcast on Instagram.
That's right.
It's 8 o'clock. We got to go. Walter, Scott, Sherry, Greg, Alexis, James, Paul, Bob, John, Mike, Charlie, Karen, and Eric.
I think that's
so
a record. Oh my gosh, you gotta text me how many that is. But that's excellent. Thank you everybody for listening. Please, I've been posting about past shows on Instagram, so take a look at Down the Garden Path Podcast on Instagram. And thank you everyone for joining us here on Reality Radio for Down the Garden Path.
Thank you for listening to Down the Garden Path with your hosts, Joanne Shaw and Matthew Dressing, right here on Reality Radio 101.